Mabuhay! Welcome on board this Philippine Airlines flight.
You miss it, don't you? Planning, packing, flying, getting lost. The thrill of travel. But the pandemic has changed the world as we know it.
Dapat bago pumunta dito, pre-book sa isang hotel na quarantine facility.
Airport COVID testing, the new passport to travel.
As much of the world reemerges from lockdowns and vaccine rollouts offer a glimmer of hope, many are starting to dream again of beaches, mountains, and the world's most iconic landmarks. While fear may never go away, the travel bug still bites. How to travel in uncertain times. I'm Hontiveros. We'll be asking the hard questions for stories that matter to you. Front and Center wants you to travel safely in the next normal. What flying looks like during a pandemic and everything you need to know before booking a flight. As provincial buses prepare for cross-border trips, a look at health protocols in place and the guidelines for sea travel for inter-island trips via passenger vessels. Now, it's far from ideal to travel during a pandemic, but it looks like the wanderlust of Filipinos still hasn't waned. A survey by the Tourism Department in June shows that 77% are still willing to travel domestically even in the absence of a proven vaccine. Now, local airlines have been offering travelers cheap flights to several domestic and international destinations. Front and center in ensuring that every plane you board is COVID-free is the Air Carriers Association of the Philippines. Joining us is ACAP Chairman and AirAsia CEO Ricky Isla. Thank you for joining us on the show, Mr. Isla. Well, let's begin with this. A lot of talk now about a COVID passport. Will that be a requirement for air travel, international or domestic? Or since vaccines and on emergency use authorization, by the way, already being given now, will an RT-PCR negative test result suffice? But Mr. Isa, before you answer that question, let's listen to what Lance Gokongwei, Cebu Pacific and JG President and CEO, had to say.
I think we have to work on a global COVID passport, no? So that each country respects the passport and recognizes that if you do have this COVID passport, that you have already been vaccinated by a credible vaccination source. No?
So, Mr. Ricky Isla of AirAsia, what is the position of the Air Carriers Association of the Philippines on this possibility of a COVID passport?
Good evening, Pia. Thank you very much. Good evening to all your viewers. You're right. I think that will actually make air travel more efficient. That's what you call the COVID passport. First of all, the COVID passport actually allows all interested citizens or passengers to fly and make sure that they're able to plan very well. Why? Because they have to register, and at the same time, they will be able to immediately apply, at the same time, put the results or implement their COVID test, and at the same time ensure that they're able to put also their necessary information such that it also includes contactless COVID testing, and more importantly, it will also be involving about tracing. So those are the basic points that I think will make our lives more efficient. And I think moving forward or further expanding this concept of passport, COVID passport, aside from the fact that you're following an IATF guideline of a very DOH-approved 48 hours lead time before you fly, that you're negative. At the same time, you are also able to determine that, for example, when you now get on board, it's going to be hassle-free. Why? Because you already have your passport, you have your QR, and I think that will make our lives a lot better. And while at the same time, all of the LGUs or local government units will be able to understand better and at the same time implement the uniform guidelines, while our passengers are also able to plan ahead of time. So in short, it's going to be smooth and at the same time contactless, Pia.
Hassle-free, in other words. Mr. Isla,
Exactly,
do we know
right.
what form this passport will take? Or this is something that is, well, literally up in the air still?
Okay, frankly speaking, I think, for example, I don't really know the exact implementation date of this passport concept. But I think if you're going to look at Boracay or your Katiklan, Manila, you will see that I think they're very successful in terms of implementing the QR method, wherein all of the inbound to Kalibo or inbound, I'm sorry, to Boracay are able to register ahead of time and get their QRs and submit all the necessary negative results, information, and their basic data. And more importantly, because of that, it's contactless and you will be able to contribute good information that it will help Katiklan or Boracay for that matter, a very good tracing mechanism. So because it worked, I think it's also meant to be implemented in all other destinations, frankly speaking.
Ms. Isa, what are the requirements right now and what will they likely be in the near future? First quarter 2021, okay. Second quarter. Of course, the timetable in terms of when a vaccine is coming, that's a little bit not very clear yet. No?
Okay. Just for your information, I'm just speaking for AirAsia Philippines. We are only flying, number one, domestic, right? Number two, we are not flying international because we want to concentrate on domestic. And ever since, domestic has been really the biggest chunk of our passengers traffic. Number two, I think we're only about 20 to a high 25% of our domestic destinations. Now, how do I now see the first quarter, which is the most important? The first quarter is going to be very important. First of all, you're coming from a strong month of December. We've noticed this in our traffic, in our bookings, even ahead advanced bookings, that our first quarter is going to be a good month. If you're now going to look at the vaccine scenario, which is like hopefully by second quarter, that is going to build a strong confidence, therefore, for our passengers to fly, especially if they know that there's vaccine and most likely there's going to be some guidelines also for our passengers with regards to the vaccine exercise. Now, when are we going to expect, therefore, our improvement, or I would say a more stabilized passenger traffic? We're looking at fourth quarter. Hopefully, all of our aircraft are back by fourth quarter, and international will be most likely starting to pick up by third quarter. So international is going to pick up towards the first half of 2022. So that's how we look at the AirAsia scenario for both domestic and international. Fourth quarter for domestic will be more or less normalized, and first half of the year for 2022 for international flights.
Last two questions, Mr. Isla. First, if you look at the top 10 domestic destinations, and we were talking about AirAsia flying domestically, in a Philippine travel survey in June this year, 6 out of 10 requiring local tourists to travel by air from Metro Manila. This is going to be a big boost for you, right? Like you were saying, first quarter, the numbers are good.
Yes. We're very thankful. As a matter of fact, hats off to our Secretary, Berna Romulo Puyat, for that DOT program. Why? Because I think it's important that we have to balance safety and at the same time economy, which I think is a good balance. You can be boosting economy via tourism, but make sure the strict protocols are in order. And I think we did very well with our Manila, Katiklan, Manila, or trips to Boracay, which at this point is going to be the good business case that all other provinces can follow. So in short, we're expecting a lot of boost also, not only via land trip, let's say to Baguio if you're coming from Manila, but to follow, for example, there's what you call the reopening of Puerto Princesa, the reopening of Bohol, okay, especially Panglao. And more importantly is I think if you're going to look at these tourist destinations, therefore this will also benefit other industries or other sectors, like for example, hotel and restaurants. So thank you very much to Department of Tourism, to IATF, and of course to the domestic of to the Department of Transportation for putting together this reopening of a lot of tourist destinations.
Yes. And speaking of thank you, sir, before we say thank you to you, one final question na pahabol. How clean is the air in the air? You know, a lot of people saying, oh, you know, if you're on an airplane, pinakamalinis na yung hangin doon.
Yes, Pia. I'm proud to say that all Airbus aircraft. That includes AirAsia 320. These are all Airbuses, right? We have been using ever since the exact air cleaner that is being used in very high efficient or highly professional emergency rooms. I'm sorry, operating rooms of hospitals like, for example, St. Luke's and Makati Med. This is what you call HEPA, high eliminator particulate arrestors. This is the HEPA filters. And these HEPA filters actually revolves the air every 2 minutes. It disinfects and disinfects 99.9% of virus, including coronavirus. And that, again, gives us that high confidence level that we're safe as long as all of the passengers are actually using the right PPEs, namely face mask and face shield. So these HEPA filters will do the works for us.
Well, that's very good to hear. Talagang biyahe na dapat talaga.
Exactly, Pia.
Yeah, but with safety protocols, of course, in place. AirAsia CEO and ACAP Chairman, Mr. Ricky Isla, thank you very much for joining us on the show. Salamat po, sir. The stories that matter are front and center, staying safe during hours-long bus trips amid this pandemic, and the health protocols in place for sea travel. Stay tuned to CNN Philippines.
We're not going to anywhere this Christmas. No holidays to go. No cruise to distant shores. The passports kept in store. We stay at home and drink some copio. We're not going to anywhere this Christmas.
We keep the stories that matter front and center. I'm Pia Hontiveros. Welcome back to the program. Hashtag safe travels aboard buses at a time when getting around safely matters more than getting around quickly. After 9 months, provincial buses with point-to-point routes are allowed again on the road, subject to guidelines set by land transport regulators. Front and center is Victory Liner, one of the largest provincial bus operators in the country, servicing routes to and from northern and central Luzon and Metro Manila. And joining us now, Victory Liner Operations Manager Alexander Briones. Alexander, thank you very much for being on the show. Let's begin with this. What's it going to be like on the bus? If the air in an airplane in flight is very clean, what can we say about the air on buses?
Well, right now, Pia, all our buses are equipped with filtration technology to where it has to be what do you call this? The LTFRB really wants the buses to actually have filtration system. So all our buses going to the north now are equipped with this. We started this siguro mga 2 months ago when we started our San Fernando Pampanga routes.
Okay, we're going to go back to the routes that you mentioned, but before that, talk to us about the other disinfection measures that you do before and after a trip.
Well, all our buses when we before they travel going to the north, we disinfect them inside the terminal, and then afterwards when the trip ends, we also have it in our terminal to actually disinfect all our buses in and out. Okay. So with the filtration and the disinfectants, we're doing that all throughout the trip.
Mm-hmm. We're looking at videos from your Facebook page, and we're seeing the seats, for example. No? There's 2 on each side. You have 1 passenger on each side, and then passengers are seated a row apart, correct?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And
this was like probably around siguro mga July, I think. But now all our buses now have barriers. And we also have buses that have spaces in between. So it's like if you're familiar with the airlines, talaga yung seats nila apart na siya. So 3 rows siya. So we have those kinds of buses as well.
Okay.
Since LTFRB allowed the buses to actually be full, if there are barriers, all our buses going to the north now have barriers in between the seats.
Okay, so at least pwedeng puno pa rin, no, kahit papaano. You service the Metro Manila, Bulacan, Pampanga route, and you're going to be starting Manila Baguio, correct? No, in a few days. But you do
Days.
yeah, you do have to go through very stringent measures because the LGU there is very strict, right?
Correct. That's very correct. So I was in Baguio just recently, and they have a central triage kasi in Baguio. So what they want to do is really centralize a database to where they want, before leaving Metro Manila, before anybody goes to Baguio, that they already know who the passengers are, and it's centralized their database. So you also get a QR code, and you visit a website, visita.baguio.gov.ph, if you want to visit Baguio, and you have to give all your information and all the medical certificates up there to upload, so that you can get a QR code, and then when you get to Baguio, they'll check that with the triage area.
Of course, this is all very important, what we're talking about, no? Travel by bus, because by land. Because earlier, in the first part of the show, we were showing the Philippine Travel Survey. 3 out of 10 destinations require travel by bus, if not by car. Baguio, Batangas, La Union. But I want you to listen. I want us all to listen to this statement made by an infectious disease expert, Dr. Benjamin Ko.
The risks on travel can vary depending on the following factors. Number 1, public versus private transportation. It's always safer to travel within your travel bubble, meaning people who you actually live with in a private vehicle with minimum number of people than taking public transportation. When choosing a public transport, make sure that it's not overcrowded and that there's at least a meter of distancing between you and the next passenger. Whether land, air, or sea, space matters, and so does time. The longer you are in an enclosed space, the higher the risk of transmission. There's someone traveling with you in the same vehicle you're in and who is probably incubating but not yet showing symptoms of the disease. Know the situation of the pandemic in the locality you are going to. It helps to be prepared and know where to avoid, and even decide whether you should or you should not push through with the trip. Whatever minimum health standards you practice in your homes, you practice there as well. Never let your guard down.
Very quickly, Mr. Briones, 2 points there brought up by Dr. Benjamin Ko. Travel with your own bubble and space matters. Can you address that?
Right. Yes, all our buses right now, as I said, LTFRB gave out AMC to where they guided us to have barriers in between the seats. No? So most of our buses now have all these barriers para at least kahit papaano, even if they're seated closely together, they have space in between. Second, all our buses then have, most of our buses, we're trying to convert them to 3 rows to where there's almost 1.5 meters apart away from each other. So that's actually very important, I think, because some passengers talaga nowadays, they're very meticulous when it comes to the spacing. Right. So we also want to give them that confidence to where when they want to travel up north, they're very comfortable with how their spacing is between each other.
Yeah, that's very
and
important.
At the same time, I think LTFR, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, very important word, confidence, when it comes to travel and what we hope will happen in next year. But very briefly, I hope you can answer this in 1 or 2 words, Alexander. No? How much did you lose during the pandemic, and how much do you hope to gain back with this reopening?
Well, we've let go of probably around 300 to 400 employees already since the pandemic started. No, so we're really hopeful and thanking LTFRB and the OTR that they're trying to open up the routes now. But I think they're also doing it very carefully and safely because of what's happening now. So we're very thankful with that. I hope all our passengers as well are very anxious in traveling, especially our Baguio and Cagayan route. So we're thinking probably around the first quarter. Same with Air Asia. I think around the first or second quarter, medyo luluwag na yung kanilang rules and regulations in the LGUs. So hopefully we see something going on within the first or second quarter.
All right, thank you very much, Victory Liner Operations Manager Alexander Briones. The stories that matter are front and center. What you need to know before setting off on a sea vessel for that much-awaited trip. This is CNN Philippines News you can trust.
We're not going to anywhere this Christmas. No holidays to go. No cruise to distant shores. The passports kept in store. We stay at home and drink some copio. We're not going to anywhere this Christmas. Stay at home indoors. But most importantly is to have you here with me. Who could ask for more? Now we're up to the task. When you're out, wear a mask and remember to wash your hands. Dreaming of stays of our happier days to London, New York and Japan. And who knows when we get to happy.
Welcome back to Front and Center. We want answers on the stories that matter to you. I'm Pia Hontiveros. How do you reduce the risk of catching COVID-19 on inter-island travel by boat? There are plenty of safety precautions in place, and it's necessary to follow them all if the travel bug keeps on biting after months of lockdown. Now, even with vaccines now in sight, the pandemic is not going away anytime soon until we achieve herd immunity, which means 75 to 80% of Filipinos vaccinated against COVID-19. Now, if that beach escape cannot wait, here's how you can stay safe. Front and center is To-Go Chief Operating Officer Waldo Basilia. Sir, thank you very much for joining us in the show. Well, let's go back again to this Philippine Travel Survey, June 2020. We showed it earlier, but another portion of it talks about the top concern, which is health and safety. There is, sir, as much concern for this if it were travel by air or land. But what about sea travel? What are you doing to make it very safe for travelers?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I think for To-Go, we've actually, if you recall, we started with the these protocols very early in the lockdown. We converted some of our ships to quarantine ships, and through that exercise, we were able to implement very strong, rigid security and safety protocols. Right. So some of that includes the general cleaning of our ships, deep cleaning of our ships, and we've also been working with the DOTR, with IATF, and with DOH. We were able to implement those protocols. Some of that include the use of chlorine solutions that we wipe down our ships. We generally clean our ships every 6 hours. And then we also do a cleanup every 30 minutes. In fact, some of the high-touch areas where we do wipe down every 1 hour. Right? For example, these are areas that would include handrails, that would include doorknobs, and all the areas that have high-touch areas. Right. So these are we do this every so often.
Well, that's good to hear, Mr. Basilia. For lack of a better term, hindi na po pwede yung dati na sometimes in some vessels, people are packed like sardines. So in terms of the number of people you have on board, is it going to be the same, or are you going to reduce that also? Or like earlier, we were talking to Victory Liner, they were saying, may barriers naman kami so we can fill the bus to capacity. What about for your vessels?
Similarly, we've implemented strict protocols about that. We don't fully utilize the ships. We manage capacity to 50%. And not only that, not only do we manage capacity within 50%, we've also managed the movement of people in the vessel to make sure that they're socially distanced, etc. Right? So make sure that we do not pack the ships.
That's good. Capacity and space. Yung requirements for sea travel, are they as stringent as, I suppose, no, they are as stringent as for air and land travel?
Yes. Actually, for sea travel, we've implemented multiple layers of protection, or you can say, for example, for a passenger to be able to onboard a ship, we have to go through the government regulations, which will include getting a health certificate from the LGUs. Number one, if you are an LSI or an APOR, you can also, if required by a certain LGU, you need also to get required PCR tests, so before you can actually board the ship. Then the second layer of protection is that even before you get into the port, you need to be able to show the right documentations, the certificate to travel, the health certification, and even we also encourage our passengers to also download the trace from the DOTR, the trace application for to enable contact tracing. So even before they enter the port, they're checked by the PCG and Marina. And then once they get into the port, there's a third layer of protection, which means before they get on board the ship, to go takes over the security protocols. We do the thermal temperature check. We make sure that everyone's wearing a face mask and face shield, right? We also manage the boarding to make sure that we do not have a lot of boarding. We do not congest the boarding area. So we do that in batches of 20 people. So it's all very secure in terms of trying to move people into.
My final question, sir. Just a while ago, you talked about 50% capacity. This will impact on your profit, no, on how much money you're going to be making. In other words, are you saying that you are willing to sacrifice in the interest of public health and safety? That you can take this, and this is something that it is a public service, to move people around, and this is something that you're willing to take.
Yes, I think it's very important. I think the financial implications are there, but I think it's more important is to take care of our passengers, right? Safety is very important. I think eventually, once the vaccine is deployed, which we're very optimistic that it could happen very soon, then we would increase capacity. But it's important for us. The safety of our passengers are foremost to what we need to do.
To go Chief Operating Officer Waldo Basilia, thank you very much, sir, for joining us on the show. Wanderlust, if it hasn't waned, it's bursting at the seams, or it hasn't been quenched, all sorts of descriptions to describe how we feel about how this pandemic has literally and figuratively curtailed and stopped travel in its tracks. But if the travel bug hasn't stopped biting, and if that beach escape or that hike up the mountains can't wait, then let's follow the rules, act responsibly, respect everyone's right to stay healthy, including yours. But if for some reason you still cannot travel, and it looks like we're not going to anywhere this Christmas, let's still be grateful and remember all those beaches, mountains, iconic landmarks. They'll just be waiting for us. This is Front and Center. I'm Pia Hontiveros. Thanks for joining us, and on behalf of the staff and crew of Front and Center, Merry Christmas, everyone.
Going to anywhere this Christmas, stay at home indoors, but most importantly is to have you here with me. Who could ask for more? So Merry Christmas to all.